Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Showing Up to Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns. This is where we talk about mind training and skill building that allows us to live a life in well-being, in an adeptness and a capability of managing our own experience and ultimately creating what we like to call here the conditions for happiness. So welcome for all of you who are new here, and welcome back for all our longtime members. It's really great to be here with you today. I'm really excited, and I want to talk about something that is super important when it comes to those conditions for happiness. Because first of all, let me just remind everybody, or if you're hearing for the first time, you're hearing it for the first time, we can't expect to always be happy. Right? That's unrealistic. Unless, of course, we happen to be a billionaire or a rock star. Okay. Other than that, though, it's going to be really almost impossible to always be happy. And someone who is always says that they're always happy is either one, being not quite honest with themselves and with you, and number two is likely to be avoiding and ignoring and avoid and bypassing difficulties that might prevent their happiness, right? And in this podcast, what we talk about is the opposite of that. What we talk about here is mind training skills that allow us to turn towards those things that might be creating a block between us and happiness. That's why we call it the conditions for happiness, because while we will still experience moments of difficulty, moments of strife or struggle or conflict or what have you, we can always return to those conditions of happiness through the skillfulness of the mind training that we talk about here in this podcast and YouTube channel. And so today I want to talk about one of these very, very, very common, almost universal, I think, actually definitely universal, things that might keep us from those conditions of happiness, which is conflict, right? Interpersonal conflict. And today we're going to talk about is conflict resolution. And I don't think it's what you think it is. All right. And you should know by now that nothing here in this podcast is what, when I use terms like conflict resolution or some like anger management, right? It's not the traditional view of what we're talking about. Okay. Because conflict management does not mean that you relinquish your own needs or your own boundaries or your own even desires. Okay. And conflict resolution does not mean that you just avoid conflict in any measure, right? It doesn't mean any of these things, at least not in the context that we're going to talk about it here today. All right. So I'm going to tell you a story very quickly, something that happened in my life just last week, over the last 7 days as of today, actually. And I hope that this story, I'm going to tell you the story first, and then we're going to sort of dissect it and show the skills that were involved in the conflict resolution. So I want to illustrate that to you through this story. I hope that makes sense, and I hope you enjoy the story. Ready? Here we go. As many of you know, I play for the last year, about a little bit over a year. I've been playing a few times a week now, ice hockey. Okay, ice hockey was something I used to love to play in my 20s and early 30s, and then I just drifted away from the game for various life reasons. And I got back into it now as my son has gotten into ice skating and playing hockey and wanting to do it. It's gotten me back into it too. And I tell you, it has brought me so much joy. And it really is, not only is it a joyful experience, and not only is it a great exercise, it makes my body feel, healthy and gives me energy, helps me sleep better and all kinds of stuff that's going on. But it's also a community. Right? Like when we enter into something that's a hobby, if you will, or just a personal interest of any kind, we find community in that thing, right? So there's, 30, 40 people that I get together with a few times a week. They're not all the same people, but total, say 40, 50 different people. That every week I see these people. These are human beings. They become friends. They become, they're part of me in a very big way. Right, in a very important way. And especially, and this is very, very important, that, the friendships that we build in a community of our own interest, well, they all share that same interest, right? So if you meet people playing hockey, everybody's really into hockey. So we might like different kinds of music. We might like different kinds of food. We might be different ages and different ethnicities and different, spiritual backgrounds and stuff like that. But the one thing that holds us all together very, very tightly is the game of hockey. And that's really beautiful. Now, I mean, you could substitute hockey, substitute for hockey any number of different activities. It could be pottery. It could be learning a language. It could be, a night out, a vegan dinner night once a week. It could be anything. But when you find something that is true to your authentic interest, you're going to find other people who are authentically interested in that as well. And that's beautiful ground, beautiful fertile soil from which true friendships can grow. So I tell you all that to illustrate how big this thing happened, this thing that happened last week was, okay? So I play in, I play 4 different teams at this point. I mean, that's one thing about me is that when I do something, I go for it, But again, I love hockey so much. So I'm playing with like 3 or 4 different teams. And on one of these teams, and it's a little bit, some of the teams are not competitive at all, right? It's just, 20 of us get together every week. We split up into different teams, okay, you guys wear white jerseys, we'll wear black jerseys, and we play for an hour and a half, and that's it. Yeah, we keep score, there's a ref and stuff like that, but there's no real competition level. Right? It's really just fun, right? But there's a couple of teams that I play on that are a little bit more of that sort of competition, which, I mean, look, as long as you're not attached to it, as long as you're not allowing it to become an emotional attachment and an emotional trigger for you, competition, there's nothing wrong with, right? It can be very healthy for you, okay? Because it gives you something to work towards, And again, as long as you're not attached to the winning, right? And as long as losing doesn't devastate you, because then anytime you feel that losing is devastating, that means that you're attached, right? That's how you can see that you're attached, right? So as long as that's not happening, competition can be a beautiful thing, okay? And so there's one league in which, and again, it's formed out of the same community. So we're all friends, okay, but we're on different teams. And each week, I'm on the green team. We play the yellow team yesterday. Last week we played the black team. Next week we play the white team, right? And at the end of the season, at the end of like 8 weeks or whatever, there's playoffs and there's a trophy and all that kind of stuff. So it's really, really fun. And I love it. I love the team I'm on. We have a great time. We've had like yesterday we played our 6th game, and it was our first loss. We lost with like a minute left in the game. We lost, it was tie until a minute left in the game. And this team was far, they have like a bunch of kids on. They have like 3 kids on the team that are like 20 years old, right? So we were definitely outgunned, and we still almost pulled it off. But before that, we had tied 4 games in a row and won 1. So this is a really good team. We're really having a good time. And so last week, right, it was our first win, okay? And yours truly scored a goal with like a minute and a half left that put us up by 2, right, which is an insurance goal, right? When you're only up by 1, it takes a half a second for a goal to happen in hockey, right? So it's like that can, a win can turn into a tie like that. And we had already had 4 ties, so we really wanted to win, We would have even taken a loss, anything but another tie, And so I scored with a minute and a half left in the game, and oh my gosh, we're going to win. This is amazing. And we did win. The buzzer sounded. We were all excited. Everybody's, high-fiving. Now, in hockey, there's a tradition, right? At the end of the game, which is usually a very rough game, right? I mean, it's, we're tussling out there. We're knocking each other around and stuff. But at the end of the game, no matter what level, even all the way up to the professional level of the NHL, at the end of a game, each team lines up and they shake each other's hands. Okay, you just line up, on either side of the ice, and you skate forward, and in a line, you just one after the other. Nice game, nice game, nice name, nice game. Slapping hand, slapping hand, slapping hand, slapping hand. And so I was getting ready to do that, right? And the way you do that is everybody goes first to your goalie, right? And everybody says, good game, goalie, and then lines up behind the goalie, and then the goalie leads us into the other team. That's sort of traditionally how you do it. So I went up to the goalie, and I was like, yeah, we did it. Good game, man. He ripped off his mask, and now my perception was that he ripped off his mask and he, with red face and fiery eyes, he started yelling at me about something I had done during the game. A game that we've won, right? I'm not going to go into the details of what he said because it would take way too long to explain the hockeyness of it. But it was something that was not significant anymore because we won, right? And yelling at me, the guy that scored the insurance goal, seemed very inappropriate, right? But here's the thing. When he did that, right, because and it's like a perfect storm, right? I was just rushing with cortisol and adrenaline and norepinephrine and, really just, we're all fired up. Hockey is a very, very intense game. You're skating very hard. You're really building yourself up, all that hyper arousal, right? And so was he. So was the goalie. All of us are experiencing that same thing, right? And in that moment, the way that he said what he said and the sort of the look on his face and the redness and the yelling of his voice, it triggered my trauma. Okay. It reminded me of my mother when I was a young child. It reminded me of, I've shared here before that I was the victim of a violent crime back in 1997 at about 4 a.m. on a very cold December evening, where I was jumped by a couple of guys. I was stabbed. I was beaten up. I was almost killed. Right. And I still have a little bit of PTSD from that. Right. And so after he said that, I lost complete control of myself, and I yelled back at him, and he yelled back at me, and I yelled back at him, and we carried it into the locker room, and we were just screaming across the locker room at each other, and I left in a huff. I just got dressed as fast as I could. I said, "Oh, and I grabbed my stuff and I left, and everybody's like, "See ya, Art." And I was like, I stormed out, I got my car, I drove home, and I spent the next 24 hours in a state of true trauma trigger, right? Any of you who have experienced trauma and carry with you a level of PTSD or CPTSD the way I do, CPTSD arising from my childhood, the complex PTSD, which arises from my childhood trauma, which was just ongoing for years and years and years and years and years, right? And then also the PTSD, the post-traumatic stress disorder, which I still carry when I feel threatened, right? Like, somebody getting in my face is no joke for me, right? It really, like, I lose my ability to be me at that point. I am no longer me. I am survival me, okay? Trauma me, if you will. And so I, spent the next 24 hours in this state, okay? But here's the thing. Now, back 10 years ago, that state would have resulted in, I would have just fed it in a sense, right? I would have been engaged with it. I probably would have continued the fight. I probably would have called the captain and said, that guy's BS and blah, 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 and I'm not playing for this team anymore and all kinds of stuff like that. It would have just blossomed and exploded into something that was, far, far greater than whatever it was, okay? And that's what trauma does to us, okay? And that's what stress does to us, because let's remember that post-traumatic stress disorder, right? It's a form of stress. It's just like any other stress. But it's very, very powerful, very powerful, and it is marked by, again, that inability to manage ourselves, right? It's like we're detached from it in a sense. It's really hard to explain. But what was different about this time, and again, and I haven't seen this version of Art pop up in, many, many years, okay, and in the past, this version of Art was here all the time, right? This was the guy that was usually around, right? Was just always mad, always, reactive, always, ready to, fight back. And this is because I always felt like I was being attacked because of the stress, right? So the stress caused by the trauma causes more trauma even in regular situations, right? Even like I told you the story about the kid in the pet store, right? This guy just asking the customer in front of me if she wanted to fill out a rewards, card application. I felt personally attacked, and I attacked this kid back with some really horrible language. You can go back and, and listen to it if you want. But here's the thing. I was able to employ the skillfulness of what we talk about here. Okay. I was able to sit with it. I was able to allow the feelings to arise. And in that allowing the feelings, and when I say allowing the feelings to arise, what I mean is to let them arise as I maintained the position of the observer of the feelings. Okay. I was not in the feelings. I was like out here watching it in a sense. Now, again, this is not something that I could teach you how to do this, right? This is what we get through the skillfulness of the practices that I talk about, right? Which is really just practicing self-awareness. Okay. And in that self-awareness, right, I'm able to see like, wow, look at what's going on in my mind. Look at how I'm believing all of these stories that my mind is telling me about this guy, and what a horrible person it is, and what a terrible, flagrant thing that just happened, right? But as I'm able to maintain that, observer's position, I'm able to start questioning some of those things. I'm able to start challenging some of those things, some of those concepts and notions that I was carrying. Like maybe I'm perceiving that he was angry and getting in my face. Maybe he was just filled with the same cortisol and adrenaline I was. And that allowed me then, from the self-awareness of really sitting with it and just watching it. And again, it always comes down to those big three, right? It's the body. I was feeling the tension in my body. I was feeling my heart and my breathing. I was feeling a little bit of pressure in my head, right? Then it's the emotions. I was able to notice like, yeah, man, you are like boiling over here with your anger. It's really, really powerful. And then in the thoughts, and this is the really important one, right? Because I'm able to listen to the story that my mind is telling me, and I'm able to say, wait a second, mind, you don't know that to be true. You don't know that to be true. You do know this part, but not that other stuff, right? And it becomes almost playful in a sense in many cases. Not in the first 24 hours of this thing. I mean, this thing was very, very powerful, and I was spitting mad. But I also found myself like, you also bring the awareness of the thoughts to the point where I found myself like I couldn't stop telling the story over and over and over and over and over. Right. And I was like imagining talking to the guy. What will I say to him? And what will I say to my captain? And all this, blah, blah, blah. But now, again, in the past, those thoughts become my motivation. They become like, okay, well, pick up the phone and call the captain and, text the guy and, do all this stuff, take action that then makes it something out here in the real world. Right. As opposed to just this internal, turmoil and tempest that was going on. Right? You with me so far? I hope so. So in the process of that sort of disidentified observation of my story and my tension and the emotions, I was able to just sit with it and just allow it to be there and to turn towards it. Not be afraid of it. I wasn't going out and drinking. I wasn't going out and, taking drugs or doing something to distract myself or to make myself not feel what I was feeling. Quite the opposite. I turned towards it. I let the feelings be there. I let the whole thing exist. I let myself experience it as fully as I possibly could. And so from that self-awareness and that observation of myself, that gives rise to empathy. And remember, there's many forms of empathy, right? Yeah, I could feel what he was feeling for sure. There was no question about that. But could I think through what he was thinking through? Could I, cognitively empathize with him? Could I take his perspective? Could I notice that maybe he was upset because a couple of things that I did resulted in him being challenged and he gave up goals, and he was feeling embarrassed and ashamed. And so he needed someone to know that it wasn't his fault, or not entirely his fault. That there was somebody that could have done something different that would have, created a different outcome. And these are the things that I was feeling. And so maybe he's feeling these things too. Spoiler alert. Turns out he was saying what he was saying as a, from a place of admiration, because he considers me one of the best defensemen on the team. And so therefore making the mistake that I made was like beneath me, right? And he expects the other people to make the mistake that I made. But I am the one that has to not make that mistake because I'm one of the good ones, essentially. So I was able to come to a place where maybe that could be true. I don't know. Maybe it's not, but maybe it is. And so just feeling that, just sort of wedging that open a little bit, just creating that little potential in my mind changed everything. Now I was able to get in touch with my own feelings on a more deep level. And what I mean by feelings is really, and I hesitate to use the word desire, right? Because desire is just a form of attachment, right? But like, what do I want out of this? What's best for me here? That's probably the best way to see it. I was able to ask that question. What is best for me? Because what feels like the best right now is to curse the guy out and to quit the team and to, show them, oh man, you can't mess with me, right? But I'm the one that's not going to be playing hockey next Wednesday then, right? And I love hockey. And also, this is my community. Now, wait, what? This is my community. So wait a second. That guy saying what he said was not just criticizing my hockey playing. In my nervous system, in my understanding, my perception, this guy was threatening to take away my community. And so in this space, I was able to see that. And now I have something to protect. Now I have something that means something to me. And this can be true in many cases. I mean, how many times have you had a fight with your spouse or with one of your kids or with a coworker? It is in your best interest to have peace in these moments, because you work here, you're in this family, you married this person, whatever it is, this is important to you. More important probably than whatever the conflict is that you're, struggling with right now. And so with that deep embodied understanding that this is bigger than anything I considered before, now I can start working towards this sort of a goal of resolution, rather than just, creating more conflict or some sort of, some notion of justice or some notion of payback or vengeance or whatever you want to call it, right? It goes, it's bigger than that now. It's much bigger than that now. And as I connect back to that bigger thing, that more important thing, not to say that the conflict itself and my feelings in that moment weren't important. They are, and so were the goalies. But we can see that there's something bigger there. Doesn't mean that we ignore the feelings. It doesn't mean that we abandon that. But it means that we can associate and integrate both of these together. Right? We can integrate the hurt and the feeling that I want to pay back, I want to hit him back. Right? I can integrate that into the bigger picture. Right? And this is what conflict management is all about, or conflict resolution, is all about. Right? It's not about avoiding conflict, as I said. It's not about bypassing. It's not about, about just rolling over and saying, oh, don't worry, because again, that was not what I was doing. I don't know if I said that, so maybe not again, but it wasn't like in this moment where I was seeing this connection to something bigger, the immediate, and I will admit that maybe the first instinct was like, oh man, fix it, whatever it takes. Just take all the blame and fix it, right? But that's not really what conflict resolution is about. Conflict resolution is about staying true to your end of this, right? Meaning there was a violation here and it was still wrong. Even though I want to resolve the conflict, it is still true that what you did was wrong. And maybe what I did was wrong too, but there's still the truth that I deserve this, that I need to retain my own grounding in this. Right? I can't just let go and just say, okay, it's all my fault, never mind, sorry. I mean, that might smooth things over, yeah, but that's not going to be a true resolution. And so we find a balance, right? And we find, and of course now, once I start getting into this place of empathy and really connecting to the bigger stuff that's happening, now all of a sudden, the stress in my body is changing. I'm no longer, erupting in this anger emotion and this tension in my body and this harrowing thoughts that are going on in my mind. The whole thing changes. And now I'm starting to look at, well, what would an apology look like? Not an apology to the guy, but apology to everybody else in the locker room. Some of whom are women and quite frankly were probably feeling not very safe with me right in that moment. So how do I address that? And if I do address that, what comes from there, right? Because if you can do that again without rolling over and saying, okay, it's all my fault, never mind, just please forgive me, and all that, like just really, taking all the blame, which is probably not really accurate, right? But doing so with a balance and an equanimity to say, yeah, there's something that I did wrong here, but there's something he did wrong too, right? And so in an apology, what does an apology mean exactly? An apology means that we are telling someone that I know what I did wrong. I can see what I did wrong, and I can see how it potentially hurt you, all you other people in the locker room. And, I want to do something here to repair that. That's what an apology is. Apology is not just saying sorry so that everything gets better. It's owning it, but owning only what you own, right? And so now, because of the shift in my stress and the shift in my thoughts and the shift in my emotions, I was able then to sit down. I texted the captain of the team, said, hey, listen, sorry about my erupting and the harsh language and stuff. She wrote back, said, I didn't think you were that wrong and it's okay and everything. And that felt really beautiful, right? It was validating. Like, oh my gosh, here's this captain who's a really wonderful human being and she's telling me that I was not all wrong. Oh, I feel a little bit, I'm breathing even a little bit more deeply and now relaxing into it a little more and feeling the thoughts now, the potential is opening up even further. And then I texted the rest of the team and I said, hey, I just want to apologize for my part in what happened. And then, of course, it's important to recognize that there's a resilience here, right? And I wasn't there yet. Okay, it was going to take more than just one day of, one afternoon of working this out. And over the coming days, I felt myself getting more and more, easy with it and relaxed with it and able to again continue to apply this same process of empathy and self-compassion and all these beautiful tools that I've developed. Kindness, compassion for the goalie, compassion for myself, all of these things that we talk about here on the podcast. I put them all into work in the coming days, and I felt my resilience pulling me back into my ground and my center and my authenticity to the conditions of happiness. And I will admit that going into yesterday, I was there nice and early because I wanted to be there before anybody else because I was really nervous about how it was going to be in the locker room before the game when we saw each other for the first time in the week. I can't even tell you how beautifully it went. I mean, it was so beautiful. The first guy there, we had a little talk about it, and he knows the guy really well. They've been friends since childhood, and he was like, "Hey, listen, you got to know that he was trying to help. He wasn't attacking you." I was like, "I know. But my perception was," and I got to express myself in terms of my PTSD, which that's not something you talk about in a locker room of a hockey rink, right? And then other teammates came in, and the goalie came in, and at that moment, the only thing that made any sense when that goalie walked into that locker room, the only thing that made sense to me, to him, to everyone else was for me to get up, walk over to him, and give him a hug. And at that moment, you can see on the YouTube here that I'm tearing up because it was just so beautiful. And at that moment, it became this conversation that we were all having, and we were all learning, and we were all growing, and we were all developing through this process that was just so gosh darn beautiful. And then it became jokes. I mean, it became like all about like at one point he says, well, last week in Art's Rage, he made a couple of points about blah, blah, blah. And it was just so beautiful. And then at the end of the game, we actually wound up losing. He gave up a bit of a soft goal at the very end. I wasn't going to say anything, but we were getting ready for the handshake again. And this time it was a much different mood because, we lost with less than a minute left, and it was like, oh, crushing defeat, and he turns around. He's like, Art, damn it. Like it was my fault. And we all, like the whole team just laughed. Like it just broke everything open. And it was just so beautiful. And here we are. We've now become deeper friends. This community has become stronger. The roots have descended into the soil, become stronger and richer. And how beautiful is that? And all it didn't take anybody else doing anything, right? All it took was me doing the inner work. So to review very quickly, let's talk about the specific skills that are involved here, right? There was empathy skills. There were communication skills. There was the skillfulness of apology, which again, I did stand up in front of the locker room, and in case none of you, read the app when I texted last week, this is me. And I will be honest with you, 3 different players had come up to me and said, don't listen to him. He's wrong. You were fine. You did what you were supposed to do. Right? So it was like, even that, like that could have been something where I'd be like, yeah, you see, screw you, blah, 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 But instead, no. I felt validated that I was, vindicated and right and stuff. But it wasn't in a way that, you see, No, it was like, yeah, so let's just hug it out and it's all good, right? There was also forgiveness that was involved. There was self-compassion involved. There was acceptance involved. And there was also resilience at play, which is something that we, that's one of Richie Davidson's 4 constituents of well-being is resilience. The other 3 being attention, generosity, and an outlook that, basically loving kindness, right? The ability to see everybody's innate goodness, as including your own. Those are the 4 constituents of well-being. And I would say that all 4 were involved on some level. Anyway, I've gone over here. I just wanted to share this with you because it was a very powerful thing that happened the other day. And yeah, I just wanted to share it with you for no other reason than I thought it was really cool. But anyway, I wish you all well. And I think actually just last night I was starting to sketch out the very beginnings of an idea for a little program, a little workshop program that I'm thinking on conflict resolution. So if you're interested in something like that, I want to hear from you, okay? Now, I mean, these workshops, I try to make them very affordable. So don't be afraid. Okay, it's not going to be hundreds and thousands of dollars, right? If I get enough people in a group, it can be very, very inexpensive. So let me know if that's something that would interest you. Okay, I'm thinking it would probably be a 6-week kind of mini course where we meet once a week. We'll go over the different sort of all those skills that I just named, right? We're going to go over those and talk about how they feed into conflict resolution, and I'll give you stuff to work on. So let me know if that's interesting to you, all right? I really want to know. Otherwise, I wish you well, and I'll be back again soon with another episode. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening, so much for watching. And again, I wish you well, and I would love to hear any stories that you have about conflict resolution too, if you care to share. All right, everybody. I wish you well. I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.